I stood at the front window, watching the Uber pull away. I had just dropped them off at the airport, my daughter Emily and her husband Darren. They didn't even hug me goodbye. It was the family vacation I paid for. A week in the Bahamas, in a villa I reserved under my name. Flights, meals, rental car, all covered by me, every cent. I even made sure the refrigerator was stocked with Darren's gluten-free snacks. But now I stood in silence. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily. "You won't be joining us. My husband prefers to keep it family." My heart stopped. What? I read it again. "You won't be joining us. My husband prefers to keep it family." I stood there, blinking at the screen like it would change, like maybe it wasn't meant for me, maybe it was some kind of joke. But no, it wasn't a mistake. It was clear, cold, deliberate. They had left me behind, after everything I had done. Before I dive in, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps more people hear stories like this. I walked into the kitchen and pulled out the thick manila envelope I'd been holding onto for 2 months. The deed to the house, signed over to me by my late husband. Emily didn't know that. Neither did Darren. She thought the house was in her name now, because I told her I'd make things simple after her dad passed. That was before she changed, before she became someone else. Now. I stared down at the envelope and whispered to myself. So I cancelled the house deed and sold it. My hands didn't even shake. Let me tell you how we got here. It wasn't always like this. Emily used to be sweet, loving, a bit stubborn, yes, but she'd call every Sunday and send flowers on my birthday. We'd go shopping together, share dessert, laugh about silly things. But when she married Darren, things shifted. I first noticed it when she brought him to dinner the 3rd time. He never looked me in the eye. When I offered him another helping of lasagna, he pushed the plate back and said, "No thanks, I don't eat processed food." Okay. Weird, but fine. Then, when they moved into the house after her father died, my house, I noticed how quickly Darren began calling the shots. He rearranged the living room furniture without asking. He told me to stop using certain detergents because the smell lingered. And slowly, Emily followed suit. My kitchen became too cramped. My garden was messy. Eventually, my presence was disruptive. So I moved into the small guest house out back, the one I had built for my sister when she visited once a year. I didn't argue. I thought it would just be temporary. I thought they were just adjusting. Then they stopped inviting me to dinners, to parties, to birthdays. I watched from the window once as they threw a BBQ for Darren's law firm friends. I wasn't even told it was happening. My grill, my backyard, my fairy lights on the fence. Emily didn't come by once to say hi. But the final straw? 3 days before the vacation. Emily knocked on my guest house door and handed me an itinerary. "Mum, everything's booked. Darren and I will meet you at the airport." I smiled. That tiny, flickering hope in my chest lit up. Maybe we were healing. Maybe she remembered who I was. I packed. I printed the ticket. I bought sunscreen and even a wide-brim hat because Darren once said I looked a bit dry. Then came the morning of the trip. I wheeled my suitcase to the porch, excited. Emily came out in a floral dress, Darren in shorts and a smug smile. "Hey, change of plans," she said, eyes on her phone. "What do you mean?" I asked. "We're just grabbing an Uber early," she said, already stepping into it. "We'll see you there, okay?" I nodded, a little confused but still hopeful. Then the text came. "You won't be joining us. My husband prefers to keep it family." I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the envelope. I never told Emily, but the deed was never transferred to her. She assumed after the funeral that everything her father owned passed down to her. Truth? He gave it all to me. He knew Darren's type. He warned me once when Emily wasn't around. If you ever feel like he's freezing you out, you have the right to pull the plug. I never thought I'd need to. But now, I made a phone call. To Mark, the real estate agent who'd been helping me quietly list the house in case something ever happened. List it, I told him, effective immediately. I stayed in the guest house while the papers were drawn up. I didn't touch the main house, didn't water the flowers, didn't clean the porch. The couple was gone, on my vacation, in my villa, laughing, drinking piña coladas with my money, while I was here, cancelling everything. When they returned a week later, Emily's car pulled up to the driveway. The house had a giant red sold sign in front. She froze. I watched from the window. Darren stepped out and began shouting, "What the hell is this?" Emily turned to him, then slowly looked up at the guest house window. Our eyes met. I didn't blink. She stormed up the garden path and banged on my door. "Mom, what is this? Where's our stuff?" I stepped out slowly, holding my phone. "You mean my stuff?" She stared. "You sold the house! This is illegal!" Darren barked behind her. I held up the deed. "Actually, it's perfectly legal. Your father left everything to me." "But you said—" Emily choked, her face pale. "I said I'd make it simple," I said softly. "I never said I'd hand it over." "Where's our furniture? Our wedding photos?" she demanded. "Shipped to your storage unit," I replied. "I even labelled the boxes." "Why would you do this?" she asked, voice breaking. I didn't answer. She knew. Darren stepped forward. "You're petty. You're crazy." "No," I said. "I'm just done being invisible in my own home." I closed the door gently. Behind it, my phone buzzed again. A message from Mark. "Offer finalised. Payment will be transferred by end of day." I looked around the guest house. Small, cosy, peaceful, and finally mine. The silence after I closed the door was louder than their shouting. I stood in the middle of the small guest house, my heart pounding but my hands steady. For the first time in years, I felt calm. I walked over to the tiny kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. Outside, I could still hear Emily and Darren arguing. I didn't care. That noise didn't reach me anymore. It was like a door had closed, not just to the house, but to a version of myself I had held onto for too long. I sipped the water and let my mind drift back to the beginning. Before all this. Before Darren. Before the guest house became my prison. Emily was different back then. She used to call me Mommy, with a smile that could light up the darkest day. We were close, really close. After her dad passed away, I thought that closeness would grow even stronger. We grieved together at first. She slept in my bed for a week. We cried in the kitchen while drinking chamomile tea and sorting through her father's shirts. But Darren moved in less than 2 months later. At first, I didn't mind. I told myself, she needs comfort. Maybe he's helping her heal. But soon, little things started changing. He'd walk into the room and Emily would immediately lower her voice. He'd suggest things, like putting locks on the pantry or asking me to knock before entering their side of the house. They began to divide everything. Rooms, groceries, even time. Darren started calling me by my first name, and Emily let him. That cut deeper than I expected. I became the invisible housekeeper, cooking, cleaning, keeping the house warm, and all while they slowly erased me from it. Then one day, I overheard Darren on the phone with someone. He was laughing. "Yeah, she's still here," he said, "but not for long. Emily's working on her." I stood frozen in the hallway listening. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I made a plan. That night I searched for the envelope my husband had left me before he died. He handed it to me 1 week before his final hospital visit. "If anything happens to me," he said, "this is yours. Use it when you need to." At the time I thought it was just another will update. But no, it was the deed. Signed, sealed, with a letter inside. "Don't let anyone take this from you. Not even family, especially not family." I never forgot those words. Still, I waited. I gave them time to come to their senses, to treat me like a person again. Instead, they treated me like luggage that overstayed its welcome. So I began my quiet withdrawal. I contacted Mark and told him to discreetly start showing the house to buyers I approved. He was hesitant at first. "Are you sure, Mom? You're still living there?" "I'm not," I told him. "I'm in the shed out back." And that's how the real process began. Now, back in the present, as I stood in the guest house and listened to Emily's raised voice outside, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and strength. I didn't want things to end like this. I never wanted to hurt my daughter. But she left me no choice. My phone buzzed again. A new text. Emily. "Mum, please, let's talk. Just the two of us." I stared at it. My thumb hovered. Then I typed, "Meet me at the cafe on Elm, noon." No emojis, no softness. If she wanted to talk, we would talk. 2 hours later, I sat at the little table by the window at the cafe. The same one we used to visit when she was in high school, back when her biggest concern was which earrings to wear to prom. She walked in late, sunglasses on, lips pressed into a hard line. She sat down across from me, pulled her sunglasses off and sighed. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. I didn't respond. "I didn't know Darren sent that message. I told him I wanted you there. I swear." I raised an eyebrow. "And when you saw I wasn't there, did you text me back? Call me? Did you ask where I was?" Her silence was loud. I sipped my tea. "Mum, look," she began. "He's just very particular about family dynamics. He's from a different background." "So am I said coldly. And yet, I never once excluded anyone from a family vacation, especially not the person who paid for it. Her face turned red. "I didn't know you felt so." "You knew." I cut her off. "You just didn't care." She blinked. "You changed, Emily, and I kept trying to see my little girl in you. But I don't know who you are anymore." She looked down at her hands, fidgeting. "You really sold the house," she whispered. "Yes." "Where will we go?" she asked, finally meeting my eyes. "You have a husband. You have a law degree. You'll figure it out," I said, repeating the same cold phrase she once texted me when I asked for help carrying groceries. Emily's eyes shimmered. "I'm not heartless," she whispered. I got lost." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I stood. "I hope you find your way back," I said gently, and I walked out. That night I received a call. Not from Emily, from Mark. "Hi, just wanted to let you know the buyers would like to meet you. They're an older couple, planning to retire in the area. They love the garden. Said it reminded them of home." I smiled. "Set it up." I stepped out onto the tiny guesthouse porch and looked at the sky. Stars, soft wind, peace. And then a sound behind me. A knock. I turned slowly. Emily stood there, holding something in her hands. It was the old family photo album, the one I thought she threw out. "Can I come in?" she asked. I looked at her. I didn't answer yet. I stood in the doorway staring at the photo album in Emily's hands. It was worn at the edges, the leather cover frayed from years of turning pages filled with birthdays, holidays and camping trips. She clutched it like it might fall apart. Or maybe like she might. I didn't speak. Neither did she. Only the crickets and the distant rustling of leaves filled the silence between us. "Can I come in?" she asked again, quieter this time. I stepped aside slowly, saying nothing. She walked in like she was stepping into a memory. Her eyes scanned the guest house, the small table, the compact sofa, the neatly stacked books near the window. This wasn't a place meant for full-time living. But I had made it home, even while she and Darren occupied the main house like landlords. Emily sat on the edge of the sofa holding the photo album in her lap. "I found this in the storage unit," she said, not looking at me. "I thought Darren had thrown it out." I sat across from her, keeping my posture firm. I thought so too, I replied. She opened the album slowly. The first page held a photo of her 3rd birthday, frosting on her cheeks, a yellow ribbon in her hair. Her father crouched beside her, both of them laughing. I miss him, she whispered. My throat tightened. He'd be disappointed, I said plainly. She didn't argue. Instead, she turned the page. There was a long pause before she spoke again. You were always there, I see that now. You made everything feel safe. Until Darren made you feel ashamed of me, I said. Her eyes darted to mine, but I didn't look away. You changed, Emily. You let someone else decide who belonged in your life. She nodded slowly. I was scared. Of what? Of being alone if I chose wrong. I took a deep breath. Sweetheart, you did choose wrong. Her hands trembled on the album. I didn't realize what I was doing. At first I thought Darren was just being protective. But then he started making decisions for me. And I let him. I let him push you out, and I told myself it was temporary, that you were strong enough to handle it. I shouldn't have had to be, I replied. Emily swallowed hard. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know. I remember who you are. I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't the icy woman who handed me the vacation itinerary and barely said goodbye. She wasn't the voice behind that cruel text. She was the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and fall asleep holding my hand. But I also knew better now. Love doesn't erase betrayal. It doesn't undo silence. You're not the only one who felt abandoned, I said quietly. After your father passed, I was grieving too. And instead of helping each other, you let him turn you into someone I didn't recognize. I know, she whispered. That's why I'm here. Not for the house, not for money, just to say I'm sorry. She opened to a photo from her college graduation. I remembered that day, how I stood in the rain for 2 hours because she forgot to bring an extra umbrella. How Darren didn't even offer his. How did he react when you found out I sold the house? I asked. Emily gave a bitter smile. He was furious, accused me of failing to control the situation. Said I should have made sure you transferred it sooner. I nodded. And what did you say? I told him I never had control in the first place, and that maybe he should pack his things. I raised my brows. You left him? I told him to stay with a friend until I figured out what I wanted. She looked up again. What do you want now? I asked. I want to be better. I want you back in my life. Not because you forgive me, but because I want to earn it. My heart beat painfully in my chest. I stood and walked to the small bookshelf, pulling out a folder. Here, I said, placing it in front of her. That's the letter your father left, the one that came with the deed. Her fingers hovered over it, hesitant. She opened it slowly, reading the words her father had written by hand. To my beloved wife. This house, this life we built, belongs to you. Don't ever let anyone take your space, your voice, or your place in this family, even if it's our daughter. If she ever forgets who she is, remind her of who you are. Tears slid down her cheeks. She closed the folder and held it tightly to her chest. I forgot, she said through tears. I forgot who I was and who you were. I nodded slowly. I didn't. There was a pause. Then Emily looked around the guest house, really seeing it for the first time. You've been here all this time, she murmured. Yes, waiting, but not begging. She looked at me with trembling lips. What happens now? I thought for a moment. You go home, I said. Figure out who you are without him. And if you still want to rebuild, you can come back. But not as someone who just shows up when they're scared, as someone who stays when things are hard. She nodded. Can I leave this here? she asked, holding up the photo album. I paused, then took it gently from her hands. Yes. She stood up slowly, pausing at the door. Thank you for opening it tonight. I didn't smile. I just said, Good night, Emily. She left without another word. I sat there in the stillness, holding the photo album on my lap. The weight of it, of years, of love, of loss, settled on me like a blanket I hadn't worn in a long time. I turned the page. There she was, in kindergarten, dressed like a little sunflower. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. But not from pain, from release. And somewhere outside, beyond the trees, beyond the broken years, I felt the quiet stirring of something returning. The next morning, light filtered through the small guesthouse windows, warm and golden. I hadn't slept much, not because of nightmares or noise, but because my heart was restless. Last night, Emily had come back, not just to the house, but maybe to herself. I sat with a cup of tea in my hands, looking out over the garden. The same garden I had planted with my husband 2 decades ago. We had spent early mornings there, him pulling weeds while I trimmed the roses. Back then, we dreamed of this place being full of grandchildren and laughter, not lawsuits and silence. Now it was overgrown. The fence leaned. The jasmine had curled around the gate like it was trying to escape. And still, it was mine. I thought about Emily's words again. I want you back in my life, not because you forgive me, but because I want to earn it. It was the most honest thing she had said to me in years. Still, words are easy. Change takes more. I was halfway through my tea when my phone rang. I glanced down. Mark, the realtor. I answered. Morning, Mark. Good morning. Sorry to call early, but I wanted to let you know the buyers are thrilled. They wired the final payment this morning. You're fully closed. I smiled softly. Thank you. There's one more thing, he added. They asked if you'd be willing to meet them before they move in next week. They want to hear about the history of the home. Said they'd love to keep the garden alive the way you had it. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Sure, I said. Tell them I'd be happy to meet. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the garden again. Someone new would be walking through that gate, watering those roots, sleeping in the bedroom where I once held Emily in my arms during thunderstorms. It wasn't a loss. It was a release. Around noon, there was a knock on my door again. I stood up slowly, half expecting to see Emily, but when I opened it, I found Darren. His face was tight, angry, but something else was behind it too. Panic, desperation. I need to talk, he said, already stepping forward. I held up a hand. No, you need to listen. He stopped mid-step. You lost the right to barge in anywhere on this property, especially now that it's not ours, I said. He looked shocked. You really sold it? Yes. But what about Emily? He snapped. What about me? We put work into that house. No, Darren, I said calmly. I did. And Emily helped. You just lived in it. His mouth opened, but I didn't let him speak. You manipulated her. You turned her against her own mother. You made her feel like my presence was a burden, like I was some outdated piece of furniture cluttering your perfect life. That's not fair. It's not fair that I spent months in a tiny guest house while you two lived like landlords. It's not fair that the woman who birthed and raised Emily was left behind with a text message after paying for your vacation, and it's definitely not fair that you thought I wouldn't fight back. He stepped back as if the truth had weight. I'm not here to beg, he finally muttered. I just thought you'd have some decency. My voice dropped lower. You thought wrong. He gave a tight, bitter laugh. Well, enjoy your little revenge. You got what you wanted. I didn't want revenge, Darren. I wanted respect. And when I couldn't get that, I chose peace. He looked at me for a long time, then turned and walked away without another word. I closed the door slowly. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from a kind of deep, shaking relief. I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding my voice inside. It was back now. That afternoon, I met the new homeowners, a couple in their 60s, kind eyes, warm smiles, and hands that looked like they still believed in soil and seasons. We walked the garden together. "This whole place feels like it was loved," the woman said softly, touching the lavender bush. "We'll take good care of it." I smiled. That's all I ever wanted. They invited me for tea once they settled in. I said yes. It felt strange, but good. I returned to the guest house and found the photo album still on the coffee table. I picked it up and turned to the last filled page. A photo of me, Emily, and her father standing in front of the house. She had been maybe 11. Her arms were around both of us and her smile was wide, unguarded. A knock came again, softer this time. Emily. She stepped in with a small overnight bag. "I asked Darren to leave," she said. "He's gone." I didn't answer right away. She placed the bag down gently. "I don't want to move back in. I need a few days to think, to be alone, but not completely alone." I studied her. She looked different now, not broken, but searching. And maybe that was enough for now. "You can stay," I said. "Thank you," she whispered. Later that night, we sat side by side on the small porch, 2 mugs of cocoa between us. "I want to help rebuild the garden," she said. "If the new owners let us." I nodded. "We can ask." We sat in silence for a while. She leaned her head against my shoulder like she used to when she was little. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a guest in my own story. I felt like the author again. The next morning, the world felt still. Not quiet in a sad or lonely way. No, this was a peaceful stillness. The kind that comes after a storm. The kind where you know things will never be the same again. But for once, that's not something to fear. I stood on the guest house porch, holding a fresh cup of tea, watching as dew glistened across the garden. Emily hadn't come out yet. She had stayed in the small bedroom last night, the one with the crooked window and the floral blanket I stitched together when she was pregnant with our first grandchild, back when she still wanted me in her life. Now she was here again, not as a child returning to her mother for comfort, but as a woman who had tasted her own cruelty and was trying to choose something better. I didn't know how long she'd stay, or if we could ever be exactly what we were before. But I knew this. Something had changed in her. There was grief in her eyes, yes, regret. But there was also something else, humility. That was new, and it mattered. I heard the door creak behind me. Emily stepped out, hair tied loosely, wearing one of my old cardigans she must have found folded on the shelf. "Morning," she said, voice soft, a little raw. "Morning." She took the empty seat beside me. We sat in silence, watching the birds flutter through the trees. Then she spoke. "I dreamed about Dad last night." I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the garden. "What did he say?" He was standing by the rosebush. He was smiling. He didn't say anything, but I could feel it, like he was telling me to wake up. I nodded slowly. "I think you already have." She gave a small laugh, but her eyes were misty. "I don't know how I let it get this far, how I let someone else make me so cold, so distant from everything that ever mattered to me." "I do," I said gently. "It happens when love gets twisted into fear, when someone convinces you that being soft is being weak." Emily wrapped the cardigan tighter around herself. "He used to say things like, 'Your mother needs to learn boundaries,' or 'She's too emotional.' At first I thought he was just protecting our space, but now I see he was shrinking me." She turned to me. "And I let him shrink you too." That admission sat heavy in the air between us. "But you're not small," she added, barely above a whisper. "You never were." I smiled, finally meeting her eyes. "No," I said. "I just stopped making myself smaller to fit into spaces that weren't meant for me." She blinked back tears. Then, from behind us, a phone buzzed. Emily sighed and pulled it from her pocket. It was Darren. She didn't answer. Instead, she stared at the screen for a long while before powering it off completely. Then she looked up at me. "I'm done." "You're sure?" I asked, not judgmentally, but with the calm of a woman who has seen too many promises made and broken. "I'm sure," she said. "For the first time in years, I feel clear." We spent the morning cleaning the garden together. She got on her knees beside the rosebush, digging carefully, just like I taught her when she was 6. Her hands trembled, unused to the work, but she smiled through it. "Mom," she said suddenly, "do you think the new owners would let us throw a farewell dinner in the backyard? Just one last evening? For closure." I paused, then nodded. "We can ask, but only if it's a celebration. No pity, no drama." She smiled. "Deal." That afternoon she drove to town to buy fresh ingredients. I stayed behind, picking herbs and sweeping the porch. I didn't think I'd ever host anything in that yard again. But this felt right. A goodbye to the house. A possible hello to something new. By evening, the table was set, candles flickering, soft jazz playing from an old speaker. Emily had cooked her father's favourite dish, lemon rosemary chicken. Even the scent brought tears to my eyes. She served the food with gentle hands. We didn't speak much. We just ate. Together. After dinner, she pulled out the photo album again. This time, we sat side by side on the bench under the porch light and turned through the pages slowly. "Do you remember this one?" she asked, pointing at a photo of her covered in mud from a failed attempt to plant tulips. I laughed. "You said the worms were smiling at you. I did not." "You did. I have it written on the back of the picture." We turned another page, and another, until we reached the blank ones. "I want to fill these again," she said. "With you. With the boys. With memories we don't have to fake." I placed my hand over hers. "I'd like that." She rested her head on my shoulder. "I know it's going to take time. For you to trust me again. For me to trust myself." "It will," I agreed. "But this is a start." Just then, the new homeowners walked by the fence. The woman waved. "You two are welcome to visit the garden any time," she called. "It feels like part of you lives here." Emily waved back. "Thank you." We sat until the candles burned low, until the stars came out, until it felt like the air itself had softened around us. Later, as I helped her carry dishes back into the guest house, she turned to me and said, "Mum, what if I stayed? Not in the house, but with you. Just for a while, until I get back on my feet." I studied her face. She meant it. She wasn't looking for comfort. She was looking for responsibility, redemption. "You can stay," I said. "But this time, we share the space. No more dividing things. No more pretending we're strangers. No more texts," she added with a sad smile. "No more texts," I agreed. Weeks passed, then months. Emily found a job with a non-profit downtown, one that supported women rebuilding their lives after toxic relationships. She said every time she spoke to someone who had been controlled, silenced, or cast out, she thought of me. She started therapy, she started healing, and our home, our new home, became a place of light again. Sometimes the boys came to visit. They asked questions as kids do. "Why don't we live in the big house anymore?" "Why isn't Daddy around?" Emily answered with honesty, but not bitterness. "He made some choices that weren't kind," she'd say, "and kindness is what we choose now." One night, months later, Emily came into the kitchen holding a sealed envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "It's the papers for the small cottage downtown. I've been saving. I put your name on it too, just in case." I opened it slowly. "You bought us a home?" She nodded. Tears welled in my eyes. "I wanted you to have something you didn't need to fight for. Something that's yours, because you deserve it. I hugged her, tightly. In the corner of the kitchen, the old photo album sat on a shelf, now filled, no longer just with memories, but with moments of change, moments of forgiveness, moments of rebuilding. As I sat by the window that night, watching Emily read to her boys in the next room, I realised something. It wasn't about the house. It was never about the vacation. It wasn't even about Darren. It was about the line between love and boundaries. And how sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to say, no more. And when someone finally hears you say it and chooses to come back, not with excuses but with growth, then maybe, just maybe, you open the door again. But this time, on your terms. And this time, you leave it open wide enough for the past to step out and the future to step in.